is a story that allows a question to be asked. It's a story about a great sultan, a great king called King Mahmud. King Mahmud ruled over a large territory, but it wasn't always so. He began his life as a humble peasant, and then he became the village chief. And when his village was invaded, he became a warlord, a warrior, and in conquering these invaders, he was able to take over territory until he had a vast kingdom. Now, King Mahmud was not just a warrior. He gathered around him at any given time a number of poets and musicians and savants, sages. But King Mahmud was no fool, and he did not just gather around him yes-men and fawners who told him what they thought he wanted to hear. And very often, King Mahmud, sometimes in the company of a vizier, would go out into the streets at night, dressed as an ordinary man, going into the taverns and the cafes and the coffee shops and talking to the people about what was going on with them, what they thought of their ruler, and so forth. One night when King Mahmud was out in disguise, in the dark of night, suddenly he was met by 3 men. Now he feared for his life, because it was usually the ne'er-do-wells who are out at that time in the darkness of night. But it seems that they were not out to do him any harm, but they were curious, and they said to him, "We are 3 robbers, and we do our business at night. But what about you? Why are you out on the streets at this late hour?" Now, King Mahmud thought very quickly, and he said to them, well, I'm a robber too. Can I join you? Now, these 3 robbers, they said to King Mahmud, "Well, we are not just ordinary robbers, you know, we are specialized robbers, and we can't just let anyone join us. But tell us, what is your skill before we decide?" And King Mahmud again thought quickly, and he said, well, you tell me your skills first, and then I'll tell you what my skill is. So the first robber said, "Well, I'm a very practical man. I have street smarts. I can dig and I can build and I can pick locks. I can do almost anything I put my hand to." And the second robber said, "Well, I have great and deep perception and intuition. I can sense good and bad energies." And the third robber said, "Well, I have the ability to be able to communicate and know the language of the animals and the birds." "Oh," said King Mahmud, "well, my skill is that I can wiggle my beard and save a man's life. Well, the robber said, well, we've never ever heard of that before, but that's a very great power. That's much greater power than any of us have. Perhaps you can become our leader. Now, with these three robbers, sometimes they would get into some arguments between themselves, but when they cooperated, they could pull off some pretty good heists. So, in asking King Mahmud in his disguise to join them, they put their heads together to see what it was that they could do to pull off some kind of good robbery. So just then they heard a dog barking, and the third robber said, "Oh, I hear that dog saying that it's guarding the gold treasure of a widow that has buried it in her house." But in conferring together, of course, they decided that they were robbers with morals, and they didn't steal old women, widows' cache of gold that they would live on. So they had to find something more. But they had been wandering at this time, and very soon they found themselves at the gate of the palace. King Mahmud's palace, indeed. But the first robber, with his skill, said, "Oh, this is a piece of cake. I can get in here, no problem." So he was able to pick the lock, and they were able to enter the grounds of King Mahmud's palace. Well, the one with his intuition and his recognition of the different levels of the vibes of things, he said, "I can smell the gold. It will lead us to the treasury of King Mahmud." So again they came to a door that was hidden behind some bushes, and the first robber was able to open the lock with a relative ease, and they entered a deep passageway. Now the one with the great insight, who was also able to see in the dark, he led the way down a long passage until they came to an area, and he said, now I'm aware that we are under the king's chamber. I bet he's lying in his bed fast asleep." King Mahmud had a little smile to himself, of course, but they were indeed at the door of the treasure house. And when they had access to this place, to their great glee, there was gold and jewels such as they'd never seen before in their lives. So they quickly filled all of their pockets and their capes and bags that they had, and made their escape the same way that they had entered. So the three robbers immediately went back to their den, which happened to be a deserted guest house or caravanserai that was said to be inhabited by demons and jinns, so nobody would disturb them. So they went there, but of course they were exhausted after their night's activities. So after sharing some bread and cheese, they gave King Mahmud in his disguise a pallet of straw and invited him to lay down and sleep, as they did. And they were all soon snoring. So as soon as King Mahmud knew that they had fallen into slumber, he made his way back to his palace, entering the secret door that led him to his bedchamber, where he lay down to catch a little sleep and to think about what he was going to do about these robbers. So the next day, when it was due for him to give counsel to all of those who came, he called his advisors to him and told him of what had happened the night before. And so immediately a band of soldiers was dispatched to bring back the gold that had been stolen, as well as the 3 robbers. Now, as soon as the 3 robbers were brought into the king's presence, the one, of course, with perception who could see in the dark, recognized immediately that this person on this throne was the being that had shared with them the night before in their heist. And so, of course, he recognized and imparted that their fate was sealed. And there was the executioner standing by King Mahmud, just waiting for the order to lop the heads of the robbers. Now, when King Mahmud said to these 3, "What do you think your fate should be?" And one of them amongst them said, "Well, last evening when you spoke about the skills that we had, you said that with the power of your beard you could save a man's life." So King Mahmud began to laugh, of course, and he realized the validity of what the robber had said. And so he did just that. He wiggled his beard and was able to save the lives of the 3 robbers, who afterwards changed their ways to become his faithful servants. Now it's been mooted that all characters in all stories are aspects of ourself. So perhaps it could be suggested that these 3 robbers in this story might represent the 3 levels of existence, those levels of existence that abide within us. The one with the street smarts, the one with the intuition, and the one with the awareness of the interrelatedness, the communication between all things, knowing that there's been times where they do get into argument with one another. And no doubt we've experienced the times when they cooperate and life seems to be harmonious and things happen that seem serendipitous. But if this is so, and we can recognize this, then the question has to be posed: what in this story does King Mahmud represent for us? Who is King Mahmud in you, or who and what is King Mahmud? What is it in us that allows those three levels of being or existence itself to meld harmoniously in what is called a state of Satchitananda, existence, knowledge and bliss, becoming the servants of our King Mahmud.